LGBTIQ+ dentro del sector marítimo, con la intención de promover la visibilidad del colectivo, alzar voces que no han sido escuchadas y promover la toma de conciencia por parte de la industria en cuanto a políticas inclusivas se refiere. La moderadora de este panel es Samirah Armengol. Les cuento un poco sobre Samirah. Samirah es licenciada en Ciencias Económicas y Administración de Negocios. Cuenta con maestrías en Gerencia de Proyectos e Inversión Social y una segunda maestría en Ciencias Sociales en Género y Desarrollo. Posee estudios de posgrado en Responsabilidad Social y Políticas Empresariales Inclusivas. Es docente y desarrolla metodologías para educación continua y educación popular. Consultora empresarial, asesora para organismos del Sistema de Naciones Unidas y está especializada en comunicación estratégica, derechos humanos y diversidad sexual. Feminista, defensora de los derechos de las mujeres y de la población LGBTIQ+. Es fundadora y presidenta de la primera organización lesbo-feminista de Panamá, CIMUF, Coalición Internacional de Mujeres y Familla. Creadora de la primera escuela de liderazgo sociopolítico para mujeres de las disidencias, la Escuela Cimufiana para Desobedientes, y cofundadora y subdirectora de la primera Escuela de Formación en Diversidad Sexual de Panamá. Escuela Diversa es el nombre de ella. Desde el 2017 es directora ejecutiva del World Pride Panamá y fundadora de la organización IPDH, Independientes Pro Derechos Humanos. Con un cálido aplauso recibimos a Samirah.
Buenas tardes, bienvenidos y bienvenidas a todos, todas y todes a este espacio. Estoy muy contenta de tener la oportunidad, la posibilidad de compartir con todas las personas que están acá. Esta es la primera vez que se hace un espacio como este y para nosotros como población de la diversidad sexual y de la diversidad de género en Panamá, es una valiosa oportunidad para visibilizar no solamente en los temas que ya hemos estado trabajando en Panamá, sino también entrar en un nuevo espacio como lo es la industria marítima, que aquí en el caso de Panamá nunca se había tomado, así que igual quiero agradecer a Gustavo por esta iniciativa y felicitarlo por la misma. Un aplauso para Gustavo, por favor. En este foro vamos a estar compartiendo con nuestros panelistas, Alex Walster. Alex, ¿nos puedes acompañar, por favor? Clarke, nuestros panelistas de lujo en el día de hoy. Dominador, Carunungan. Y a nuestro querido Keir, Gravil, pero él va a estar online, con él vamos a hacer una presentación híbrida. Este panel busca compartir experiencias vividas de la población LGBTIQ dentro del sector marítimo, en la intención de promover la visibilidad del colectivo, alzar voces que no han sido escuchadas y promover la toma de conciencia por parte de la industria en cuanto a políticas inclusivas se refiere. Los objetivos específicos. El objetivo número 1 que tenemos para este espacio es visibilizar las experiencias y desafíos que enfrentan las personas LGBTIQ en la industria marítima, incluyendo la discriminación, el acoso, la falta de apoyo y la falta de protección. El objetivo número 2 es analizar el impacto de la discriminación y el acoso en la vida profesional, personal de las personas de la diversidad sexual que trabajan en la industria marítima. Y el objetivo número 3 es dialogar acerca de la importancia de crear espacios seguros e inclusivos en la industria marítima para las personas LGBTIQ y discutir cómo estos espacios podrían ser promovidos y mantenidos. Esto es una necesidad imperante. Sabemos que la industria marítima ha sido tradicionalmente un espacio ocupado por hombres y que ha sido manejado desde el poder masculino. que ha sido opresivo y que ha discriminado a todos los grupos vulnerables. En este caso, vamos a comenzar haciendo algunas preguntas, pero vamos a comenzar con nuestro compañero Keir para hacer la primera ronda de preguntas. Voy a ir haciendo preguntas diferentes a nuestros panelistas que tenemos acá y vamos a tratar de ser breves, ya que nos están diciendo sobre el tiempo, pero a pesar de que le haga una pregunta a cualquiera de ustedes, si quieren aportar, son bienvenidos a hacerlo para generar mayor contenido al diálogo. Tenemos a Keir. Hola, Keir.
Hello, good afternoon.
La primera pregunta que vamos a hacer es ¿cómo afecta una identidad de género u orientación sexual diferente a la heterosexualidad el acceso y permanencia en el trabajo dentro de la industria marítima? ¿Sí logro escuchar? Hola, Keir, ¿me escuchas?
Yes, I can hear you. Sorry.
Ok, repito la pregunta. ¿Cómo afecta una identidad de género u orientación sexual diferente a la heterosexualidad el acceso y permanencia en el trabajo dentro de la industria marítima?
Apologies, I think I'm missing the translation.
Ok, yo tengo las preguntas en inglés. So I'm going to make the question in English. How does a gender identity or sexual orientation different from the heterosexuality affect access and retention in jobs within the maritime industry?
I think when it comes to gender identity and sexual orientation, looking at jobs within the maritime industry, as an LGBT person, you're often trying to look at what the acceptability of that is within the company that you're applying for example. If you want to look for a new job, often in addition to what heterosexual people will look for, you're trying to find out more information about the culture of that company, and it can put quite a lot of pressure on the job searching process in any particular job, especially maritime, especially if that information is not particularly forthcoming. So that is an obstacle that often is felt by LGBTQ plus people. When it comes to retention within the maritime industry as well, I think not having the relevant support can also mean that people don't necessarily feel valued and maybe don't want to stay in those jobs as well. So if there isn't the right support for the LGBT community and for their specific needs within that as well, then they're much more likely to be more fluid with their job movements. It's often been said that especially younger people, sort of millennials and Gen Z people, they're much more likely to move to another company that has a better, more inclusive culture, even if that means that they lose pay as a result. Having a more inclusive culture is much more important to them. Considering that the maritime industry is already facing a shortage of mariners in the future, now and in the future, it stands to reason that having a much more inclusive and overtly inclusive, not just what happens inside, but showing that to the rest of the world or the rest of the maritime industry, what they're doing, that's really important for both recruiting and retaining people.
Sí, definitivamente. Son tiempos en donde se está haciendo una transformación en todos los espacios y todas estas transformaciones tienen que incluir a la diversidad sexual y como mencionas, sí, definitivamente el tema de que los millennials y todas estas nuevas poblaciones están llegando al espacio laboral, a los mundos laborales, casi que hace exigente que se pueda incluir, ya traen otra mentalidad, cosa que hace un poco más fácil el poder presionar desde todas partes. Lee, ¿cómo crees que la industria marítima puede ser más inclusiva y acogedora para las personas LGBT? ¿Qué políticas o prácticas crees que podrían implementarse para mejorar la situación?
So my background, certainly as an officer and also as head of cadet training, is that I dealt with the most vulnerable and youngest of our seafarers, and that's cadets. One of the challenges that we face is that, certainly within the UK, we are very good at training competent officers. What we're not very good at is training our officers outside of that sphere. And certainly when it comes to the LGBTIQ community, we have this habit of sending our cadets unprepared. They're prepared to be a cadet and they're prepared to operate their vessel, but we're not preparing them for the challenges outside of that, the challenges of different cultures on board, the different thought processes, and we really do fail. And this is not just cadets in the UK, this is probably cadets globally. And it all comes down to education. And it comes down to preparing them for what is going to happen. And on the flip side of that, where we also get it wrong, is that the perception of masters and senior officers that they are homophobic or transphobic is sometimes wrong. And the reason why I say that is that we don't give our senior officers the tools to deal with the LGBTQ plus community. So what I mean by that is that a perfect example is I had a chief engineer who I perceived was when I was a junior officer as being very homophobic. It was just his lack of engagement, and he was a nice person, but I perceived him as homophobic because he wouldn't engage with me. He wouldn't, not like the other officers, and it was just because he didn't know how to communicate. He was fearful, actually, to ask questions. He was fearful to say, what does, one of his questions was, in my generation, queer was seen as a derogative term. Now, all of a sudden, you're using that. It took him a while to ask that question because he was fearful of saying the word queer because he thought he was going to get into trouble for saying that. But we're not giving our senior officers the tools to open those conversations. And they are fearful. I mean, when I came out as gay, it was just the LGBT. Now, obviously, we have more of an inclusive community, which is fantastic, but our officers and our senior officers, by their companies, are not being given the tools and the policies that they need. Policies are fantastic and they're needed, but when it comes to actually being on board the ship and operating it, we're not giving both our cadets and our senior officers the right information, the education that they need to be more inclusive.
Muchas gracias. Definitivamente la educación es la clave de todo en todos los espacios. Yo creo que deberíamos ir incluyendo en todos los espacios de formación, en todos los niveles, derechos humanos, diversidad, reconocimiento y acciones afirmativas para los grupos vulnerables, porque no nacemos con esa información, porque todo eso se va aprendiendo. Y bueno, nuevamente lo generacional. Hay personas que les va a costar más, pero porque no saben, ¿no? Y siempre le digo a la gente, no tengan miedo a preguntar. Ahí está la respuesta. De una manera respetuosa se puede comenzar a comprender. Dominador, ¿qué consejos les darías a las personas LGBTIQ que están considerando una carrera en la industria marítima? ¿Cómo pueden abogar por sí mismos y trabajar para crear una cultura laboral más inclusiva?
Alluring ladies and laudable gentlemen, I greet you all. Good afternoon. And also I want to thank Gustavo for having me here and be able to speak in front of you. Okay, so to answer the question, I think that the best advice that I could give to the LGBT that is considering a career in the maritime industry is just be yourself. Despite the discrimination, the maritime industry as a whole is both a sad and a happy place. And it's in your own perspective on how you're going to face these adversities. But in the end, it will still make you strong and versatile and, of course, resilient. Like they say, a ship in the harbor is safe, but it is not what ships are built for. The meaning of LGBTQ in the maritime industry may be both a challenge and a privilege. In my case, it became a privilege, actually. I entered the industry when the world started to accept us. But the first thing you need to do is to accept yourself first before others accept you. In my experience, I was able to have a wonderful time on board, and I didn't experience much of the discrimination. However, this does not apply to all, and others may not share the same opinion as mine. And I want to highlight a lot of experiences of real people from my hometown, the Philippines. And here are some of the things that I saw online, how harassment had affected their careers, and this is during their cadetship. I saw these are real accounts from our alumni from our school. Like they teach them wrong information about machineries that is like outright unsafe and unethical, and they dedicate offensive names to an extent of making it a graffiti inside of the engine room. They spilled water on the face. They demand to drink them too much and curse them and their family. And there are even those homophobic that say that they're intent to throw them overboard. And unfair treatment and unequal work distribution. So those are some of the experiences that I may have not experienced, but it exists. So I think overall, that is my advice that I could say, that just be yourself because it may become a privilege or it may become a challenge for you to be in the maritime industry as an LGBT. Thank you.
Muchísimas gracias. Me encantó esa respuesta. Alex, ¿cómo pueden los empleadores en la industria marítima ser más proactivos en la promoción de la diversidad e inclusión en el lugar de trabajo? ¿Qué pasos concretos pueden tomar para apoyar a sus empleados?
Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for the question. It's an excellent question. It's a question also that I have dealt with in my own professional life at work. My company, Navigator Gas, has created an extremely supportive environment for me to work in. But there are still further steps that we can take. And this morning, we heard a lot of our speakers talk about policy, about regulation, about the laws, etc., that are in place and the work that could be done there. But very little was talked about when it comes to implementing that. So it was touched upon, but really now we need to move from discussing the problem as we already know it and discussing what legislation we can put in place, but now towards taking specific steps and specific actions. So in Navigator Gas, we've done a number of things. If you look on social media, you'll see that we started tackling the diversity issue in our business. So businesses like ours, obviously, very, profit is an objective of ours. We need to be a profitable business. So we have linked our diversity performance and our diversity targets with financial performance. And the way we've done that is by availing ourselves of sustainability-linked loans, where we've set one of the KPIs to be a diversity KPI. So what we've said to ourselves, or the target that we've set, is that by 2028, 35% of the positions, management positions in our business will be filled by women. So that's just one step that you can take in addressing a particular diversity issue. Training also has its place, but I think maybe the main one is by creating an environment where you can safely challenge bias, and you can challenge inappropriate behavior, or you can challenge perhaps an inadvertent comment, and to do so in a safe and respectful and diplomatic way, and to create this safe environment, to reinforce the policies that we've set for ourselves. I think that's probably the main one. Is really being not afraid to challenge a behavior that is, maybe not desirable. So in my case, I can honestly say that I have not had any issues at work because of my sexual identity. In fact, I've experienced nothing but support. But I also do wonder how many other people in my company identify the same way that I do, or identify as LGBTQI+. And I also wonder whether that is because we haven't created a safe enough environment for them. I honestly don't know. But what I do is I make sure that I challenge bias, and I look for ways to link the company's ESG strategy and objectives to addressing these topics. So that's how I would do it.
Muy bien. Mencionaste lo de tener un equipo gerencial de mujeres para X tiempo. Yo creo que es importante que también consideremos como movimiento lograr exigir que tengamos algunas acciones afirmativas para que podamos representar en los espacios gerenciales de mandos medios y mandos altos también a la población. Es significativo porque si nosotros no hacemos la lucha, entonces la gente pregunta, ¿por qué tiene que ser una lucha? Bueno, porque es disruptivo. Hablar del tema o detener las agresiones muchas veces a las personas les incomoda, pero quienes podemos estar, digamos, estamos en este panel, hemos tenido la posibilidad de enfrentar esto por la educación, porque tenemos argumentos, porque hemos estado en algunos espacios que también nos han permitido entender y comprender, obtener herramientas para evitar la discriminación. Keir, are you there? Are you with us?
I am indeed, and I've got the translation now.
Ah, ok, perfecto. Ya te iba a leer las preguntas en inglés. La pregunta. Ok. Keir, ¿cómo crees que afecta la masculinidad y la heteronormatividad presente en la industria marítima las experiencias de vida, bienestar, prospectos futuros de las personas LGBT en la industria marítima? ¿Cómo se puede promover un ambiente de trabajo saludable y seguro para los empleados, incluyendo aquellos LGBT?
So the first half of that question with regards to the presence of masculinity and heteronormativity in the maritime industry and how it affects life experiences. From my own experience, hiding yourself is a really difficult thing to do. And it takes an enormous amount of energy to do that as well. In areas where I've worked, so I've worked in shipyards and I've worked at sea. And in both those, especially in my early career when I was young, I was not open about myself. I hid my, I hid my identity, and the amount of energy that took was quite considerable. And when you have that amount of energy being dedicated to hiding yourself, it's not put into your professional life. It's not put into your work and your work relationships, and you're not able to excel as much as you can be. As a result, in terms of future prospects, that can hamper those because you might not be able to put as much energy into your work. You might not be able to do as much as your fellow employees just because of the amount of time that you're trying to hide yourself. And as a result, that can have impacts throughout the rest of your career. Now, I've been very fortunate in the fact that, especially now, I work for a company that is very open and very supportive of that, and I can be myself and I can excel, and so can everyone else who identifies as LGBTQ within the company. For the second half of this, where you said how can a healthy and safe work environment be promoted? Well, one of the things that my company Frazer-Nash has done, and lots of other companies, is to have a support network. And for us, this started at the beginning of COVID, really. We had it was a small group of us. We developed a support network for LGBT employees. And as word of that grew, and we gained the support of the senior leadership team and other people within the business, that went from about 4 people 3 years ago to about 40 people today, bearing in mind the company is about 1,000 people. So that's really grown. And we've gone from doing things such as the odd intranet article here and there to doing Pride events, having a dedicated Pride section of our website, externally facing so that people can see what we're all about. We have a diversity and inclusion section of our website, and we communicate all these things online as well so that everybody can see this and what we're doing. It kind of links back to the first question about job retention. People can see what we do. They're interested. They know that they're going to be safe there, so they will apply and will come to work for us. And people want to stay working for us because of the fact they feel safe doing so. So that's my personal experience of both the sort of how I have developed over my career from being very shy and very introvert to being in conferences like this one. And if you told me about, at the beginning of my career that I would be at a conference like this in front of so many people, albeit online, of course, apologies that I couldn't be there in person, I wouldn't have believed it, but here I am. So it's testament to that transformation.
Sí, yo creo que yo tampoco lo hubiese creído hace algunos años atrás, que yo estaría aquí. Bueno, Dominador, ¿qué rol pueden desempeñar las organizaciones de la industria y las redes de apoyo para la comunidad LGBTIQ en la promoción de la inclusión y el cambio cultural en la industria marítima?
Okay. I believe that organizations can support networks by showing commitment to the cause of being more inclusive and creating a more visible platform within the organization. To tackle discrimination with encouragement to form events and give enough voice to them. This must be a safe place where every member may concur, consolidate with brushing issues and be heard not as a singular individual, but a group of empowered individuals. With this, a pendulum shift towards making networks within organization a safe place to grow, and we must hear the leaders say how important diversity and inclusion is to them and lead by example. Otherwise, no one's gonna believe them. Yeah.
Gracias. Sí, definitivamente los espacios seguros se van creando y se van generando también con la visibilidad de aquellos que podemos dar un paso adelante. Esto motiva a que otras personas también sientan esa confianza. Lee, ¿ha notado cambios positivos en la actitud de la industria marítima hacia las personas LGBTIQ en los últimos años? ¿Y cómo crees que se pueda continuar promoviendo estos cambios y avanzar hacia una cultura de trabajo más inclusiva?
When I became a cadet at 18, as you said before, if I fast forwarded my life and thought that I'd be sat here now talking about being gay and being in the maritime industry, I pretty much would probably laugh and be very hypocritical. But I've been in the industry over 20 years, and I've seen a fundamental shift, both good and bad. And the reason why I say that is that the good part is that we are able to have these conversations. Gustav, you have set yourself quite a task, because if this doesn't happen next year, we're going to be falling out.
Sí.
Because you've opened up the conversation. Now, 18-year-old me really loves you for that, because on board the ship, I was scared to come out, as Keir said. It wasn't fear, it was more the fear, well, probably the fear of rejection, because when you're part of a crew, for 4 months, 8 months, they do become an extension of your family, and you don't want to let them down. Now, at 18, I didn't want to let them down. So me being gay, I felt like I was letting them down. It's only through maturity and growing up and realizing that, you have to go through this process of growing up and realizing that you need to be strong. You need to be vocal. You need to challenge those perceptions. That I really grew, and when I decided, or when I came out, it was such a liberating feeling, and I was shocked at the reactions. The fear that I had was not needed. I was embraced, and I'm not saying that this is the experiences of all our seafarers, unfortunately. I wish it was, but I very much was welcomed. Where I felt the challenges weren't with the crew, it was with the organization. Where I was let down was by my employers. And one of the things that I negative in terms of We all see in July, certainly in the UK, the rainbow flag being flown by organizations, and there's nothing, bar that post, that social media post, there's nothing else there. There's no teeth to that. We've done our bit for social, diversity and inclusion, thank you very much. And then, August rolls around and those challenges consist, it's important, it's fantastic. There's a container with rainbow flags flying around, painted onto it. But if we look in the room today, where are these organizations that fly that flag in that month, in Pride Month? And these are the challenges. We need to challenge that. And we need to say, why are you not in the room having these conversations? So this is important. It's important to seafarers, and the seafarers' voice needs to be heard. And we've spoken earlier on about how it's great to have these policies. It's great to have these regulations and these laws, but it's the seafarer on board right now that's going just down that way there that are facing the real challenges. They're the ones that are facing sometimes awful conditions every single day. And that's why we're here. We're here to raise their voices and make them heard. Seafarers are so important. I mean, during COVID, it was highlighted the fact that everything that we wear, we use, is brought by seafarers, and their voices are being lost to flag waving and corporate voices. But in the end of the day, it's the seafarer that's important in this whole conversation, and we mustn't lose sight of that.
Me encanta. Gracias. Definitivamente es un tema de personas. Estamos hablando de personas. Y muchas veces perdemos de vista esto también. Nos quedamos como en la parte más general del tema, nos quedamos en las letras, nos quedamos en el discurso de los derechos, pero se nos va de la vista que estamos hablando de seres humanos. Voy a cerrar con una pregunta general para todos, todes. Y básicamente, bueno, no es una pregunta, sino ¿qué recomendaciones o qué piensan que deberían hacer las empresas, las organizaciones dentro de la industria marítima y también las organizaciones de sociedad civil que estamos haciendo la defensa de los derechos humanos para mejorar la calidad de vida y la seguridad de las personas de la diversidad dentro de estas empresas? Comenzamos contigo, Alex.
That's another excellent question. I see two sides to this question. So on the part of the companies, I think it's really bringing alive those policies and procedures and pledges that they make and actually taking positive action. I think that's really necessary. And as Lee has already said, there are plenty of companies out there that will wave a flag, that will paint a container different colors, but all other times of the year, they're not to be seen. And that has to change, and as a sustainability professional working in a really supportive environment, Navigator Gas, I want to be there making those changes. I want to implement procedures and policies, and like I've already mentioned, we've got our sustainability-linked loan, but we're also taking other initiatives such as setting up employee resource groups and creating the dialogue, having the conversations within the business, rather than focusing on perhaps the PR benefits of waving a flag. It's bringing stakeholders to the table, and conferences like this are amazing, but we need to be having those conversations within our businesses as well. When it comes to civil society organizations, well, those are the people that are holding us to account. Yeah, you guys need to tell us, you guys need to campaign, you need to enter into that dialogue with us and hold us to that higher standard, and call out people who aren't playing the game, who aren't delivering what they promised and what they set out to deliver. That's really, really important. So in my view, two-sided approach. Businesses need to be having those conversations internally, and civil society organizations. And by the way, there's a few civil society and volunteer organizations within the industry that nobody has talked about today. They include organizations such as ICE1, who deliver fantastic service and help for our seafarers. Seafarers Missions and lots of other organizations out there that need to come to that table, that need to start addressing these issues. So, and then on the other side, civil society needs to hold us to account.
Gracias. Keir, ¿cómo lo ves tú?
I think one of the important things to remember as well is that when it comes to supporting the LGBT community within the maritime industry, especially not just within, but also from our allies, is that it only really counts when it's inconvenient. So if you're an ally and you're supporting the LGBT community, obviously, we all welcome allyship. However, you need to remember that it only counts when it's inconvenient, and that includes people who, like myself, as a gay man. At the moment, in the UK and around the world, there are lots of issues being faced by the trans community, and it's important that people like myself are helping other, even more marginalized groups within our community as well, using the privilege that I have and using the fact that I am in a more senior position within the company to give them a voice as well. So it's about understanding the where we are as a whole community, but also understanding where parts of our community are not at the same level as others as well. And I think, Alex, you're right there. It's internally as a company, we obviously have to support our employees. It's more than just about putting rainbows on everything. It's about having HR procedures that are equal across all employees, that allow the benefits of the company to be shared out across all employees. Whether you could have, in fact, within Frazer-Nash, we do have a number of LGBT employees that have adopted or have their own children, and they should be able to access exactly the same benefits, the childcare benefits as well. But also for organisations, externally, those advocacy groups outside of companies, absolutely keep us in check, keep us to account. I know in the UK there are a number of organisations doing that, and don't be afraid to ask the difficult questions. But yeah, the phrase that has always stuck with me throughout my career, and now that I'm within and one of the more senior people within the Pride group in Frazer-Nash, is that allyship only counts when it's inconvenient. So hence why I'm trying to look at where I am in an organization and how I can help pull other people up as well.
Gracias. Sí, creo que todas las personas que vamos abriendo estos caminos, que hemos podido avanzar de alguna manera, tenemos la responsabilidad de garantizar el bienestar para las generaciones que vienen y permitir que se abran muchísimas más oportunidades. Ya para concluir, me gustaría, Dominador y Lee, me gustaría una idea que ustedes consideren es lo que necesitamos lograr de aquí a 20 años, a 10 años, porque no lo pongo tan cerca, sino como un trabajo cultural. ¿Cómo lo verían? En una frase que llegue a la industria.
Education. I think the key to all of this is educate. Sometimes people are so scared to ask the question. And like you said before, ask the question. If you get it wrong, that's fine. If you learn from it, great. If you get it wrong again, then that might be a little bit of a different conversation. But, we're so fearful. Seafarers are so fearful to ask questions and because of getting it wrong and what the repercussions could be to getting it wrong. Because there's a tendency at the moment to really pounce on people's opinions and shout at that. And we're all entitled to opinions. But, we learn through getting it wrong. And it's important that we give our seafarers a chance to really learn and flourish from the mistakes that are made. I do feel that, and give support. I'm a trustee of the Seafarers Charity in the UK, and the Seafarers Charity is now working so closely in terms of diversity, inclusion, and through education, and making sure that our stories are heard. I gave an example of a chief engineer. The chief engineer started off very homophobic. When I left the vessel for the last time, he came up and thanked me and said that, thank you for my patience, because he continuously got it wrong on some occasions. And I had to challenge him, and I had to say, look, stop, think about what you've just said. but I didn't do it in a way where he feared that he could ask a question again. So, and that for me was so important that he, through education, through patience, through challenging him, that he learned, and he became such a good friend of mine now, and he's a different person. And so it can happen. I think it was Dr. Nick in the opening that said that, you know, we're not born with these prejudices, we can change. And that's a perfect example where a person with these homophobic views over a period of time, through education, patience, and saying stop, worked. And he became and is now an ally. And it was through that careful interaction that I turned what could have been a continuously a homophobic person into someone that went, you know what, I'm really sorry. So educate and support. Those are the two keys. If we get that right, then again, Gustav, in 10 years' time, this is not needed, hopefully. You know, we want to make sure that we get it right and our seafarers are supported.
Gracias. Sí, definitivamente la educación es la clave. Dominador, algo para cerrar que consideres que es relevante decirle a las empresas.
I actually agree with what Lee had said, that it is education, but I want to specify it into education to remove the bias within the industry, because I believe that one of the root causes that caused all this problem is this unconscious bias. The maritime industry had been male-dominated from the very start, and that's why our workplace is not built the same for everyone. It is built to support certain types of people. Unfortunately, I am not one of these white, heterosexual, able-bodied men, but I'm a member of a minority. And as a member of the minority, the more differences that I have, the more hindrances that I'm going to face in trying to advance at work. With this, it had caused us underrepresentation in key leadership positions and access to senior leadership. And with this subjective matter on hand, objective selection for jobs had hindered our progress in the industry, and capabilities are being overshadowed by a biased outlook. So I think with proper education, we could remove that bias, and all of this problem could be solved, like not by a single year, but a lot of time and a lot of effort. But it's a good start.
Sí, yo quiero decir algo y bueno, básicamente es mi conclusión, pero es algo que habíamos conversado previamente en nuestra reunión de primera interacción, cuando nos conocimos, cuando vimos la metodología que, bueno, Gustavo, ni más decirlo, ha organizado esto de manera muy precisa. Y cuando estuvimos en nuestra primera conversación y nuestro primer diálogo, la conclusión es la misma conclusión que voy a decir ahorita, pero ya con todas las letras. Las empresas de la industria marítima tienen que salir del closet. No solamente hacer, sí, no es solamente pintar el contenedor, este es un chiste privado, no es solamente sacar un post que diga aliado, sino que el ser aliado o aliada, aliade, se demuestra en las acciones cotidianas. Se demuestra teniendo el valor de detener a las personas que discriminan dentro de la empresa, deteniendo cuando se hace bullying, cuando dicen algo que no es de manera correcta. Se detiene cuando, como dice Keir, llegamos a espacios gerenciales y tenemos la oportunidad de crear políticas más respetuosas y más inclusivas para todas las personas. Esto se logra con educación, pero también con valentía. Así que invitamos a, como Gustavo ha sido valiente con este foro, que otras empresas se sumen. El otro año queremos ver este espacio más fortalecido, con más organizaciones, porque en realidad ya no pueden detener la avanzada. Los derechos humanos siempre van a estar del lado correcto de la historia. Gracias. Ajá.
I just wanted to end it. If Dom is the future of our industry at 20 years old, up here on the stage with a voice like his, I think we're in a very good way. Yeah.
Gracias. Muchas gracias por ser el panel.
Thank you for saying that.
Bien, muchas gracias a todos los panelistas. El comité organizador de esta conferencia los invitamos a permanecer en la tarima. Le deseo hacer una entrega de reconocimiento a los miembros de este panel. Para ello invitamos a Eliezer Domínguez, voluntario de I Exist 2, para la entrega de estos. Primeramente, agradecemos al señor Keir Gravil. Hacemos entrega al señor Alex Walster, jefe de Gobernanza, Ambiente y Gestión Social, Navigation Gas. Al señor Lee Clarke, gerente general de la Administración Marítima de la Isla de Man. Al señor Dominador 3 Carunungan, representante de la Asociación de Oficiales de Marina y Gente de Mar de las Filipinas. Y a la señora moderadora, la señora Samirah Armengol. Por favor, posen todos juntos para la fotografía oficial del panel. Los despedimos, muchas gracias.